very much to everyone who attended. In presidential administration, then Professor Elena Kagan attempted to re-envision administrative law through the lens of the president's personal influence on the regulatory state. To Justice Kagan, or then Professor Kagan, Chevron deference was not grounded because of an agency's expertise or experience. Rather, she said, a sounder version takes unapologetic account of the extent of the president's involvement in certain administrative decisions in determining how much deference is due. Kagan wrote, under this view, courts should apply a variable deference regime dependent on the role of the president in an agency's interpretive decision-making. So the stronger the president's fingerprints are on the executive action, the more courts should defer. Kagan's perception of presidential administration is uniformly positive. Not surprisingly, she was a White House lawyer for President Clinton. The president, she explains, is politically accountable to the populace and can use his influence to coordinate and achieve ambitious regulatory goals, which are otherwise impossible in an ossified bureaucracy. If the executive ever goes too far, Kagan maintains, the courts can check that arbitrary and capricious exercise of authority. These parameters and not technocratic expertise should give the courts comfort in deferring to the White House's agenda. There's a flip side, I argue, to Kagan's theory of presidential administration. I contend that certain instances of high-level administration may be less salutary. So first, where an incoming administration reverses a previous administration's position, simply because a new sheriff is in town, courts should verify the statute actually bears such a fluid construction. This will be very important real soon. Second, where an administration discovers some heretofore unknown power in a statute, even an old statute, that allows it to confer substantive rights, courts should raise a red flag, especially where this was a power Congress explicitly withheld. Third, where an administration declines to enforce a statute that Congress refused to repeal, immigration, right, under the guise of prosecutorial discretion, courts should be very skeptical. And fourth, where the evidence exists that the White House attempted to exert its influence, especially in the process of an independent agency, courts should consider how that bears out. So my article puts Kagan's thesis to the test by analyzing these four species of what I call presidential maladministration. She had presidential administration, I have presidential maladministration, and I assessed their virtues and vices. And I, in fairness, wrote this when I was expecting a Democratic president. Now there's Republican president, so maybe liberals will like my theories much more. But I think there's reason why when a president's involved in the administrative process, courts should be skeptical. So I begin by discussing Chevron, and the first aspect is what I call presidential reversals. Within the context of Chevron, courts view ambiguous statutes as susceptible to evolving interpretations, which can change from year to year. Right? If Chevron itself rose because the Reagan administration viewed the Clean Air Act differently than the Carter administration. Right? The entire case arose because of a change in positions. I contend that when you have a position changing simply because of a new president in town, courts see does a statute permit that. I think the Clean Air Act did. It was a fairly nebulous statute, but other provisions don't. And we saw a lot of this through the Obama presidency. In the Justice Department, there's a phrase called upon further reflection, which really means upon further election. Okay? Mm-hmm. The second species of maladministration I discussed is called presidential discovery. This is where the president discovers in an old statute of power that was always there. The leading example is FDA v. Brown and Williamson tobacco, right? This was a case where we had a 100-year-old food and drug statute, and suddenly the Clinton administration said, wow, we can regulate tobacco, even though no one's ever done it before. I also discussed the Affordable Care Act, which was perhaps not long for this world, but the president looked to the ACA to confer various rights that simply are not present. Okay. The third aspect is what I think most significant, which is called presidential non-enforcement. This transpires when the president says, repeal statute X, let's say in immigration law. Congress says, we will not repeal statute X. And the president says, okay, you don't have to. I've discovered through my power of prosecutorial discretion, I don't have to do it anyway, right? I've all along had this discretion. As Congress, you're not really important. And I discuss this in terms of what I call a cycle, the 5 Ds, right? Ready for the 5 Ds. While Congress deliberated immigration reform, the president disclaimed the power to act unilaterally. After the bills were defeated, the president debated internally and discovered the power to do that which he previously announced he could not do. I walk through this in painful detail in my paper. This should warrant judicial skepticism. The final species is one we should be very eager to look at in the near future. It involves presidential intrusion. With respect to the FCC's net neutrality regulations, there's actually good evidence that President Obama tried to influence this so-called independent agency with improper means. The craziest example, on the day the president released a YouTube video calling for Title II regulation, I'm not making this up, at the home of FCC Commissioner Tom Wheeler, a bunch of protesters showed up and blocked his driveway. How did they know within minutes of President Obama's video being released to show up at this guy's driveway? This is community organizing, meet, notice, and comment, right? This is a concerted effort to try and intrude on an independent agency. And there's all these emails going back and forth that are actually quite disquieting. Read the paper. So in conclusion, I think Professor Kagan's overly sanguine view of presidential administration, bolstered by unrealistic expectations of accountability and non-existent paths of judicial review, is worthy of reconsideration. A careful accounting of presidential reversal, discovery, non-enforcement intrusion weakens the general foundation of deference altogether. Courts should hesitate before they reward maladministration with obeisance. Indeed, deference encourages further abuses of the administrative process. This nudging, right, should be discouraged with heightened scrutiny. And as the Federal Register turns the page from Obama to Trump, this article, I think, provides a timely analysis of courts should react to unprecedented, that's with an S, not a C, unprecedented approaches to maladministration. Thank you so much. I look forward to my esteemed colleagues coming up the flank. Thank you. Perfect.